Joining us now via Skype is Middle East and terrorism expert Dr. Phares. Dr. Phares is an advisor to the Anti-Terrorism Caucus of the U.S. Congress and to members of the European Parliament. He is the author of The Coming Revolution, Struggle for Freedom in the Middle East, which projected the uprisings in the region well before they even happened. Dr. Phares is also a special advisor on foreign policy and national security to presidential candidate Mitt Romney, but he is not here on behalf of the governor today. And Dr. Phares, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's turn to Egypt. Muslim Brotherhood just declared victory for their candidate, and they also rejected the disbanding of the parliament. What does that mean for Egypt? Is the Muslim Brotherhood moving to take over?
It is indeed the Muslim Brotherhood now. By claiming that they have won the presidential elections, we'll see more about the regular count later, and by refusing the decision by the Constitutional Tribunal to disband the parliament where they have a majority, are going to claim that they have the parliament and the presidency, and they're going to move forward basically to push back against the military and try to attract some voters and citizens, especially those in the middle, the liberal, the secular, the youth, the Christian cause, so that they could consolidate their power in the future. That means that we're going to be seeing soon an Egypt which has a very strong regime that is Islamist, but the military in Egypt are not going to go exactly by what the Muslim Brotherhood wants them to go.
Now, how will that affect U.S. interests and the peace process with Israel?
Well, a takeover by the Muslim Brotherhood via the presidency and eventually a majority in parliament, if they can, will mean two things. It will mean, first of all, that the country is going to have less good relations with the United States, as was the case before. They are going to basically call, although in a phased way, on the weakening with the relationship with Israel and eventually on canceling Camp David if they can. That is going to pose a problem for United States foreign policy in the region at a time where we see the rise of Islamist militias in Libya, in Tunisia, but also in Gaza, in the midst of a civil war in Syria. So it's going to be very complex, very difficult for the current administration or for any new administration coming to Washington next year.
Now, Syria's violence is ongoing. Is there a U.S. plan? Why aren't we able to help the population of Syria against Assad?
It is very unfortunate that the U.S. administration, the Obama administration, did not really address strategically the situation in Syria in 2011, when there was an opportunity, when the Assad regime was pretty much isolated, where there was a worldwide move on behalf of the international community to bring down those authoritarian regimes. Now that we are in an election year in America, it's going to be very difficult for any president, including for the Obama administration, to wage a campaign a la Libya, because the Iranian regime, the Hezbollah in Lebanon, and many Iraqi leaders are going to be supportive of Assad. So does the United States have a plan so far for Syria other than issuing statements and eventually allowing Saudi Arabia and Turkey, or even encouraging them to send weapons to the opposition? None so far. We will see in the next month if this administration will adopt a different strategic direction in Syria, or if we'll have to wait until the end of our electoral process in America in November.
Now, is there a risk of Islamists controlling Syria after Assad?
It's very interesting because the way it is right now in Syria is, while a majority of the opposition of civil society in Syria are secular, are moderate, are civil society people, Syria as a whole is in between, is crushed in between two pressures by Islamism. Remember, the regime, the Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad, is backed by an Islamist regime, that's the Iranian regime, by an Islamist jihadi organization, that's Hezbollah. But then even within the opposition, there are a lot of Islamists. The Muslim Brotherhood are one political network that is Islamist. But even within that opposition, you have Salafi jihadists, and you have a small number of Al-Qaeda, insignificant. But all of that constitutes a very large concern for those who want to see Syria moving towards democracy and pluralism. It seems that, as in Egypt, the liberal democracy supporters in Syria are now smashed between the Iranian Islamists and the Muslim Brotherhood.
Dr. Phares, you touched on this earlier, but how are Libya and Tunisia faring after the Arab Spring? We hear the Islamist militias and jihadists are making progress there.
They are making progress. Look, across North Africa, civil societies were the ones, seculars and youth and women and minorities were the ones who rose against the authoritarian regimes. But unfortunately, because the West in general and the United States in particular did not go very fast in partnering with the initial wave of protests, what has happened, specifically in Libya and in Tunisia as we see it right now, is that in Libya, the Islamist militias are taking over, are clashing with other armed groups inside Libya. And in Tunisia, the Islamic Nahda party, and to the right or to the extreme, if I may say, you have Salafists, very extreme fundamentalists, jihadists, are also making inroads. So within the next weeks, I'd say even a few months from now, we're going to see a very different landscape in North Africa, whereby Islamists are on the rise and civil society secular forces will be suppressed.
President Obama is stating that by killing bin Laden, we weakened al-Qaeda, which accordingly has been defeated. Do you agree?
I don't agree with the second equation that is, killing bin Laden is an act of justice. This is not a strategic act because between the time bin Laden fled Afghanistan, he became a symbolic leader of al-Qaeda, and it was an act of justice that the United States and soldiers, the SEAL team, would go after him, capture or kill him. But to say that the killing of bin Laden has weakened al-Qaeda is not correct on the ground. We see that al-Qaeda is expanding in Yemen. Al-Qaeda is going much faster in Somalia, and it has opened more battlefields than ever before in Africa and the Sahel area. Look at what's happening in northern Nigeria, in central Nigeria, the Boko Haram. They never existed before. Northern Mali is now falling into the hands of a militia that's very close to Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda cells are spreading. So, to answer the question, it was an act of justice to kill bin Laden, but Al-Qaeda is up and running. We don't have a strategy yet to defend those societies from the most important weapon of al-Qaeda, the ideology of al-Qaeda.
Okay, so what can we do to stop al-Qaeda and the extremists in the region and help advance democracy in the region?
It is very simple. We, first of all, need to change our current policy. They need to be a strategic change of U.S. foreign policy. On the other hand, we need to partner with those civil society forces of youth, of women, of minorities, of intellectuals, of people who oppose jihadism in Egypt, in Libya, in Tunisia, in the Levant, in Syria. Unfortunately, what we see right now is instead of partnering with them, we are going to be welcoming the Muslim Brotherhood. So it is going to be very difficult to fight the ideology of al-Qaeda and therefore fight al-Qaeda without having a massive change in United States foreign policy.
All right, Dr. Walid Phares, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.